In this lesson, you're going to learn how to do double stop bends like a pro. When playing guitar, there are normal techniques and then combination techniques. A combination technique is just two techniques being used at the same time. There are lots of examples I could show you, but for now, we're going to focus on a really cool combination technique, which is called the double stop bend. This is a mix of a double stop and a bend. Let's go over some bend tips that will help with this, and then we'll get right into double stop bends. A bend is when you play a note, and while holding that note, you push the string up toward the ceiling or pull it down toward the floor. When doing a bend, make sure to use as many fingers as possible. If I'm doing a bend with my third finger, I'll bunch my first and second fingers side by side with my third finger and use all three fingers to help with the bend. Notice how there's very little to no gap between my fingers that are doing the bend. If I'm doing a bend with my fourth finger, my first, second, and third fingers will bunch together side by side and help with the bend. Notice again how there is very little to no gap between my fingers. But the bend does not only come from my fingers, it also comes from a rotation of my wrist. By bunching as many fingers as possible and using my wrist, my bends have more strength and more control. Let's review bend direction real quick, and then we'll get into the double stop bends. If I'm bending a note on the high E string, B string, G string, or D string, then I'll bend the string up toward the ceiling. If I'm bending a note on the A string, or the low E string, I'll bend the string toward the floor. If I try to bend a note on the low E string toward the ceiling, I'll push the string off the neck and it makes a terrible noise like this. One of my other lessons goes really deep on the bends and all the different types of bends you can do, including quarter step bends, half step bends, full step bends, and all the different bend shapes you can make. So if you want to learn more about that, then make sure to check out that lesson. A double stop is when you play two notes at the same time. You can play a double stop using two fingers like this, or one finger like this. There are a couple different things to think about when playing double stop bends. One, are you playing the double stop using one finger or two fingers? And two, are you trying to bend both strings or only one string? One type of double stop bend is a unison bend. That means you'll bend one note so it matches the pitch of the other. For an example, I'll put my first finger on the 7th fret of the high E string and my fourth finger on the 10th fret of the B string. If I bend the B string up a whole step, which is 2 frets, then the pitch of the B string will match the high E string. This is a unison bend. I can do the same thing with the 7th fret of the B string and the 9th fret of the G string. If I bend the G string up a whole step, 2 frets, then the pitch of the G string will match the B string. That's another unison bend. If you can't get the two strings to exactly match the same pitch right away, don't worry. It takes practice training your ear to get these notes to match perfectly, and it takes time building muscle memory with how much you need to bend that note. But if you use as many fingers as possible to help with the bend, and you rotate your wrist to help with the bend, then it should make it easier. If you find you're muting or muffling one of these notes by accident, try to really get up on your fingertips and move your fretting hand thumb lower on the guitar neck. Now this next double stop bend can be done with one finger. For this example, I'll use my third finger on the 12th fret of the B string and the G string. With this example, I'm not using the tip of my finger, but instead I'm using the pad of my finger, this part right here. Usually when fretting notes, you want to keep a good arch in your fretting hand fingers so that the very tips of your fingers are fretting the notes and you're not muffling any strings. But when playing these double stops, I try to keep my fingers flat and pressed against the strings. This makes it easier to bar the notes I want to play, and it also allows me to mute other strings that I do not want to ring out. So I bar across the B and G string on the 12th fret, holding these two notes down onto the fretboard. Then I rotate my wrist to bend the strings up toward the ceiling. So while my third finger is pressing down on the notes of the 12th fret of the B string and the G string, that same finger is also gently resting on the high E string so that it silences it. And the tip of my finger is touching the D string to help it stay silent too. Practice playing and arching your finger so that the G and B strings ring out while you mute the D string and the high E strings on purpose. I can do the same thing using my first finger, barring across the 10th fret of the B and G strings. Now when doing these double stop bends with one finger, you'll notice that I like to keep my fingers on an angle to the fretboard. If I try to do these while keeping my fingers in line with the frets like this, it just makes it feel really awkward. My thumb also moves up closer to the top of the neck to help give myself some extra strength with the bend. Two other common double stop bends would look like this, with your third finger on the 14th fret of the G string and fourth finger on the 15th fret of the B string, again with a full stop bend. Or like this, with your fourth finger on the 15th fret of the high E string and third finger on the 15th fret of the B string. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. This is just one of many combination techniques that I'll be teaching you. If you haven't already, pick up your guitar and start playing these all across the neck, paying close attention to the tips that I gave you.